Welcome everybody to our webinar on legal aspects on agrivoltaics today. I'm very glad to see you all in this round, to welcome our international experts. My name is Max Tromsdorf. I'm heading the group of agrivoltaics here at Fraunhofer ISE, and I'm leading the subtask within the Task 13 IEA program. And I will just shortly present you what actually we are, who we are, what is the background and the motivation behind before we directly jump into our first presentation on legal aspects in France. And of course, before I start, I'm very glad that we did not solve the technical issues, but we find a way around them, and that we now switch to Big Blue Button instead of Teams. I'm sorry for all the inconvenience in advance, but it looks like most of us made their way to this digital room. So you should now see my screen.
Yes, we see it. It's just not in the presenter mode yet.
Yeah, but now it should be fine. IEA PVPS Task 13 workshop. The legal aspects on agrivoltaics are not as easy because we strive different aspects in the law, and that's challenging but also very interesting. And I'm very excited to hear more about the different countries. We had to just focus on 4 countries to not extend the time frame too much, but we are sure that with France, Germany, Italy, and Israel, we have some very interesting countries because there is a high dynamic currently. And I think to start with, that's a good selection. The International Energy Agency, IEA, is already founded in 1974, and it's a body of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. The core activity of the IEA is the Technology Collaboration Program, with the goal to foster global collaboration on important future technologies for the energy provision in the world. And the program involves thousands of experts coming from academia, government, industry, so very diverse fields. And within this technology collaboration program, one of these programs is the IEA Photovoltaic Power Systems Program, in short, PVPS. And this program was established in 1993 with currently 32 members. Most of them are countries, but there are also 5 non-countries. That's the European Commission and 4 other associations. And the mission of the PVPS is to enhance the international collaborative efforts which facilitate the role of photovoltaic solar energy as a cornerstone in the transition to sustainable energy systems. So that's the framework of why we are here today and what is the background. One of these tasks in the PVPS program is focused on reliability and performance of PV systems. That's task 13. And within this task 13, there is one, this is the picture from the kickoff. So the task 13 work program is from 2022 to 2025. And one of these tasks within the task 13 is the subtask 2.2 dedicated to agrivoltaics. And here we are now. So you see it's a rather big framework with a bit complex structure, but I'm very glad that the decision was taken 1.5 years ago to also have one dedicated subtask to agrivoltaics. And I'm very honored to be involved there and to support the goals that we have within the subtask, which are to connect researchers and industry worldwide, to increase and disseminate the knowledge on agrivoltaics, and with that to support the development of agrivoltaics. And also one part of it is that we work on a global facility data bank where we try to collect data, to provide this data, to evaluate it, to show the diversity of agrivoltaic systems, how they work, what are the lessons learned, and so on. Of course, we do face some challenges because agriculture is typically not a part of the IIA activities. Also, the diversity of agrivoltaics is not as easy to handle. So to create an understanding about what agrivoltaics actually is and how to address the different designs, applications, and involved regulations, that's a challenge, but also part of our workshop today. And well, how to get agricultural experts involved. I just can announce that it's an open work stream. We are today 32 members in our subtask. A few of them are already from with an agricultural background, but if there are more members with especially agricultural background or also social acceptance science and so on, that's something where we are definitely very open and thankful to extend our members. And well, another challenge is the time zones from time to time with our wide field of background countries. Deliverables, there are also some within the subtask 2.2. That's a dissemination workshop 1 in month 5, legal environment of agrivoltaics. That's what we are here today. There will be a second one in end of next year. And the final deliverable will be a report where we summarize all the findings and the status quo of the technology in approximately 3 years of time. So far, for an overview, that's the agenda for today. We'll have first a talk from Benedicte Larose from the Applied Science University in Kehl, shedding light on the legal aspects of agrivoltaics in France. And we know that France was the front runner in Europe. So we are very curious to hear what are the lessons learned there, what is the status quo here. And then later we move forward with Jens Vollbrecht from BDH Berlin to Germany. Then approximately at 10:30, we'll have a short break of 10 minutes before continuing with Mike Green regarding the developments in Israel, and finally to Italy with Michele Pellegrino and Francesca Tilly. And with this, I would stop my introduction because I know that we'll have a lot to discuss and to listen to. I hand over to you, Benedicte. The floor is yours and the screen.
Thanks a lot, Mark. So I will try to share my screen now.
Sag das auch alles gut durch, weil es sind immer noch jetzt nur Teilnehmer.
Can you see it properly now?
Looks great.
So the PowerPoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. So perfect. Hello. First of all, I wanted to present myself briefly. I'm Benedicte Larose, coming from France. I'm not sure it's a good excuse for my bad English, but I really will try to do my best. And I'm very sorry if it's not good enough. Please tell me if you didn't understand something or if I have to repeat.
Benedicte, I think it's perfect so far.
I will try my best.
I have much more trouble with native English speakers, to be honest. So.
Okay, thank you. That's very nice. Why? So, as Mark already told, I'm working for the University of Applied Science of Kiel, and actually within the Kiel Institute of Applied Research. As you can see on my map, I'm actually working in Germany. It's why I'm actually French. I studied law at first in Bordeaux and then made a LLM, Magisterlegum in Erlangen-Nuremberg, which have a double master degree in French and German law. I've worked almost 5 years as a legal counsel in German companies, so not at all with agrivoltaics. And I started last July to work as a part-time research assistant at the University of Kiel. And I'm currently working on the legal and administrative aspect of the construction and implementation of agrivoltaic in Baden-Württemberg. It's a land project which the Baden-Württemberg land finance itself, and the Fraunhofer Institute is leader. It's called Modell Region Agrivoltaik Baden-Württemberg. So that's why I came to agrivoltaic, and because I'm French and have a master degree in French law, I'm gonna try to explain you the legal framework of agrivoltaic in France. It's that's my agenda. As you can see, it's very short and very interesting for the moment, because I will have to explain you it in two parts: the actual current state of the law and the new legislation in the making, because there is actually two law proposal by the French Parliament. One is specific to agrivoltaic, and the other one is concerning renewable energy and therefore also concerning agrivoltaic. So that's why I think I had no other choice than divide in two parts my presentation. And so I will first expose the current state of the law and which are the associated problem with it, because there is always problem. So agrivoltaic in French law, it starts with the definition. There is actually no legal definition of agrivoltaic in French law. The Article L 211-2 of the Code of Energy give a definition of which source of energy could be considered as renewable, and it's obviously include photovoltaic solar energy, but there is no mention of the agrivoltaic, which is pretty surprising, because actually agrivoltaic is planned each 5 years. The government is making a multi-annual energy planning, Programmation pluriannuelle de l'énergie. I will call it PPE after that because it's too long. And the current one is concerning two periods, 2019 to 2023, and then 2024 to 2028. And it claims, so this planning is making a big place to solar energy with huge target. It's concerning ground panels and roof mountain panels, and the total target to 2028 will be between 35.1 to 44 gigawatt. You will say, yeah, it's not agrivoltaic, but indeed it is, because this programmation is very precise. So you have the number I just provided you with here, and after that you have a list of measures which should be taken in order to achieve those targets. And one of them is actually agrivoltaic. They name it as an innovating solution to achieve this target, and it's already made it clear that two limitations shall be made, or two borders are brought for agrivoltaics. First of all, it has to be in synergy with the agriculture. So agriculture remains the main topic, and the maximum production volume is limited to 140 megawatt per year. So they already make clear agrivoltaic won't be the most sources for solar energy. That was this planification could be changed because this period is already made in clear, the first one, and the second one is a programmation which already could be adapted. So let's see what they decide, if they change it or not. There is, I forgot one point which is actually important in all mention of agrivoltaics that you found in law or article. You have no distinction made between the use of solar panel above plantation or grassland within an animal breeding exploitation, for example. So agrivoltaic, as I interpreted it from the text I saw, is not excluding one for the other. No, in order, because there is already agrivoltaic installation in France, and there is two possibilities to achieve an installation. In order to define the legal framework, you have to combine the rules of several laws, most of them the energy code we already mentioned, and as in several other countries, also the town planning code. And to that, no, the environment code, but this one won't be a further part of this exposition. Just want to expose you how we can, how France came to build agrivoltaic installation without a legal definition of it. It came from this planning programmation and the possibility offered to the Commission of Energy Regulation to make call for tender. And those one, there is several sort of them, and the one there is one named AO Serie INO. INO is for innovation, and it's concerning only agrivoltaic. The target was to research more, to have innovating solution in the field of agrivoltaics. It only concerns installation with the maximal unit power of 3 megawatt. So it's only concerning small installation. And for those one, there is a buyback obligation. The project is coming from the state. The state is also taking the obligation to buy the energy. If those processes are very rare, so it doesn't cover all the possible or all the already built installation, there is also the possibility for private energy producer or operator to farm and build an installation there as soon as they become the authorization, of course, but in that case there is no buyback obligation. So they have to negotiate a power purchase agreement with the energy operator in order to sell the electricity which it produces. So that's the two mode in within the one. We can buy, we can build some agrivoltaic installation. Now we're gonna go further to the second very important rule in that case, the town planning code. This code is organizing the condition under whom an agrivoltaic installation can be built. And just like a lot of other countries, or the one I know, the principle is an agricultural land isn't buildable. It's determined in Article 111-3 of the Town Planning Code. Construction may only be authorized on an urbanized zone of the municipality. and obviously agricultural lands aren't urbanized zone. But just after this article came the article 111.4 of the town planning, which organized exception to the principle of unbuildability. So first is you can buy an unurbanized zone of the municipality when the building and installation are necessary for the agricultural exploitation or collective equipment, and as long as they are not compatible with the, they're not incompatible, sorry, with the exercise of an agricultural, pastoral, forestry activity on the land on which they are located. Those two conditions are cumulative. And we have actually an interesting decision judgment from the Conseil d'État, which is the highest administrative court in France from 2018, which says that the installation of photovoltaic panels on agricultural land is perfectly feasible, despite the specific action afforded to each land. However, a real agricultural activity must be maintained on the plot concerned. On that case, the Conseil d'État considered the agriculture was just a mere pretext for the installation, because before this project, some plants were cultivated on the target land, and it was a cultivation. And after the photovoltaic installation, the aim was to have only a fallow land. That's why they consider it isn't satisfying the condition. But with that judgment, a decision, the Conseil d'État didn't reject the principle of agrivoltaic and just give to the judge an obligation to really check if the conditions are sufficiently provided, and if there are, it's actually open and it's possible to have some installation of agrivoltaic. The construction of the buildable on an agricultural land isn't without consequences, because due to an narrative from 2015, an agricultural land can only be used for another purpose than agriculture for a maximum of 15 days in a row per year, which means it isn't fitable with an agrivoltaic installation, which will stay there 1 year, of course. And that's why with the installation of agrivoltaics, the land is losing its agricultural character, and therefore the farmer is also losing the aid from the rural policy. Exactly like in other countries, there is a long procedure and a lot of pieces to produce in order to get a building permit. All the needed pieces are depending on the size, the capacity, and localization of each project. But it concerns the participation of the citizen in order to make the project acceptable, the implementation in landscape, the protection of fauna, flora, forests, and ground. For now, agrivoltaic is treated under the procedure concerning solar panel on the ground. Since the procedure is currently being examined by the Parliament in order to be simplified, and I made a choice there to not expose it here, because it will be too long and too unspecific to agrivoltaic for the try now for just an expose of 25 minutes. And if we have a little bit of luck, the process will be completely changed within the next week. That's why I made the decision. I hope it's okay. So now I wanted to after the town planning aspect, also the contractual aspect for the farmer in France. The most popular contract is a simplified lease contract, which means the photovoltaic operator is financing the complete installation of agrivoltaic and paying a rent to the farmer in order to compensate the use of the agricultural land. And that's also the case when they're negotiating or signing purchase agreement, a power purchase agreement with some energy operator. There is also two other possibilities which are rare, but not there. So say first of them is Amphitocles, landowner, which can be another person than the farmer, is leasing his land to the photovoltaic operator or agrivoltaic operator for most of the time, a very long time. It can be up to 99 years. At the end of this leasing contract, the landowner is becoming owner of all the made installation. And if they have enough money for it, farmer can, of course, self-finance the project, or they can also build some collectivity or the farmer in order to co-finance the project. And they are then owner of the construction and selling the energies themselves. For finances, and it is one of the most or loudest critic made in France against agrivoltaic. The land price are increasing for farmers, which is making very complicated to newcomers become farmers. So at the end, they're very afraid agrivoltaic would make the agriculture too expensive to start for some newcomers or for farmers who aren't the landowner. But there is always hope, and France is actually working, as I already say, on two new legislation. There is one specific to agrivoltaic. It was a proposal from the Senate. It was already adopted by the Senate, and it was tabled on last October by the National Assembly, and also right away to the Committee on Economic Affairs, which is in a smaller committee than the whole chamber, to examine what the Senate adopted, what they think about it, make some survey, some research, and make some home proposal before they propose a new text or the same text, maybe, I don't know, to the parliament itself. And then it's going to be debated. So you all know, I think it's all the same in most of the country. Legal lawmaking is always could be very long. But what is interesting for us in this proposal is, first of all, it started with a definition of agrivoltaic. As you understood it earlier, there is none for the moment in French law, and it starts with a proposal of change for the article L 340-36, first point of the Code of Energy, which describe what is an agrivoltaic installation, and already making the whole light on the agriculture enable this installation should enable agricultural production to be maintained or developed in the long term. It's also an answer to some definition proposal which were made for some private and public institutions who are asking since a long time or demanding to become a legal definition of agrivoltaics in order to keep it determined and delimited. And so demand were heard in this proposal because the proposal in this second point already instilled a lot of delimitation in order to have a strict definition of agrivoltaic. And you have, first of all, two cumulative conditions: significant agricultural production and sustainable income for an active farmer. And one of the following conditions shall be fulfilled or guaranteed. First, improvement of the agronomic potential and impact, adaptation to climate change, protection against hazards, and improvement of animal welfare. I'm not really sure what they want to achieve with this formulation. I interpreted it as an acceptation of agrivoltaic on by animal breeding exploitation and not just for plantation. In which case it could increase or improve the welfare of the animal. I don't know, maybe some of you have some answer. I presume that there will be some change or explanation still there if the law is adopted as it is now, or if it's really come to a law. That's of course uncertain right now. There is further delimitation. It has, so if one of these criteria is substantially heard, then the installation won't be considered as agrivoltaic. And if two of them are heard, then it won't be considered as agrivoltaic neither. The problem will be here to determine what is substantiality impairs, what they exactly mean with it. So I think there are going to be a lot of debate and research to made on those points if it comes to it. And last but not least, an installation may not be considered agrivoltaic if it has at least one of the following characteristics, which are agricultural production shall remain and stay the main activity on agricultural plot, which is an answer to the people claiming or to the concept that agriculture might become a mere pretext to agrivoltaic, and the installation should be reversible. That's an answer to the risk for the grants that we demade the grant. Therefore, they want to be sure the installation can be removed. So that's the proposal concerning agrivoltaic. I looked in the agenda of the Assembly and National Assembly. There is, for now, no date, no planning when this law is going to be debated to the Assembly. The legislation making process in France is like ping pong between the Senate and the National Assembly, which means once the National Assembly is going to examine it, so afterward, if they change something, it has to go again to the Senate. If they change something, it has to go again to the National Assembly, which means I can't tell you right now what is going to be adopted, if something is going to be adopted or not, and when. But the goal, the will of the government and the parliament is clearly to encourage and promote agrivoltaic. And there is a law which might come sooner than the one concerning agrivoltaic, is a legislation project which was presented to the Council of Ministers last September. It's based on 4 pillars: speeding up authorization procedure for renewable energy project without disregarding environmental requirement, freeing up potential land suitable for renewable energy projects, speeding up the development of offshore wind power and improving financing, the attractiveness of renewable energy projects. So you will tell me it's not concerning agrivoltaic directly. You're right, but because there's always a but, it is concerning agrivoltaic for everything which is concerning the authorization procedure and the development of the attractiveness of renewable energy project. Because as I told you at the beginning, solar energy is defined by the law as renewable energy. And for now, agrivoltaic is treated under solar panel. Not everything, but when they want to buy something and to build something and they need a reference and they look in the measure referring to solar panels. So I assume this will be a benefit for agrivoltaic world who could then be accepted or built faster. For this legislation project, the accelerated procedure has been initiated by the government, which means the proposal will be just examined once by each chamber, once by the Senate and once by the National Assembly. It's already done by the Senate. It's now currently, the last debate was yesterday night. It's currently by the National Assembly, and we'll see what's come out. More than 1,900 amendments have been examined by members of the parliament, so it's a very high debate. And thanks a lot for your invitation. I'm done with this, I hope not too long, presentation about frameworks of agrivoltaic in French law.
Benedicte, thank you so much. It was just in time. I was impressed. 9:40, that's exactly the timeline to have. Now 10 minutes for discussions, for questions, and there were already some in the chat, and some of them are pointed in a similar direction. So I would start with one question of Bengt Springt, who's also a member of our subtask. He's asking about the limits or goals for the agrivoltaics development. You mentioned it in the beginning, and there was something like 140 megawatts per year, but you also pointed out the global PV development goals. Maybe you can tell us so what is the development path dedicated to agrivoltaics, if there's any?
It's actually the numbers that I showed you. It's only, I'm just sharing again my presentation. Those, if I understand the question right, those numbers are only concerning solar energy and ground panels, so for photovoltaic. So that's the main goal for 2028. And we started by 7. It's all in gigawatt. I'm not sure I really understood your question, sorry.
Yeah, so the question is it limited to these 140 megawatts per year, or is it, so usually if you think
this
about
one.
Development path, this annual development could increase, but it looks like it's stable with 140 megawatts per year. Is it correct?
Yeah, it's correct. 140 megawatts per year. No, I understood. Sorry. It's only concerning agrivoltaic for now. It might increase with the new law and the new perspective, because the Ukrainian war changed a lot in the French mentality too. But for now, it's stable by 140 megawatt per year for agrivoltaic.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's clear now. You mentioned that it's a big discussion in France regarding the potential to increase land release for farmers. There are two questions from my side. Is there a really scientific result about it, or is it just the assumption or the?
There is no. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
There is no scientific research, but they already saw that the price were increasing, the price of the land only. So for newcomers who wanted to say, okay, I want to start a new exploitation, the price are way higher because of the potential. When a promoter came, okay, it is possible here to build some agrivoltaic, then the price are increasing, and it's also increasing above those land, and so they already could see it. And thank you for the question. I forgot one point in the new legislation project regarding renewable energy. Agrivoltaics is just mentioned once. They wanted to create a commission in order to exactly research the effect on the land price from agrivoltaic and how far it is. The draft was a target to 3 years, give a commission 3 years in order to research those points. I don't know how it's gonna see in the version, but it was one of to make some more research. And sorry to interrupt you. I wanted to answer one question at a time. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. We can make one after the other. And it's very interesting because also here in Germany, it seems to be not 100% clear whether this effect is taking place. So great to hear that they try to shed light on this. And Sebastian Breer asked in the similar direction whether there is any legislation somehow trying to avoid these rising land prices. Is there any?
For now, no.
For now, no. And no discussion so far you are aware of?
Just what I told you, they want to research if it's already the case and what to do it. So it's because a lot of farmers are complaining about it.
Yeah. Two questions were also going in the similar direction regarding, well, I mean, you pointed it out actually, Benedikte. What is actually meant by main activity or by enable agriculture productivity? Probably there is no clear definition about it, but the discussion is ongoing, as I understood, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's ongoing. They want to frame it in order to avoid having no culture at all after 3 years. So for now, what we could see in the draft proposal was a time condition, so that the agriculture should remain in the time. And what I also could read is it's not obligatory or mandatory to keep the same plantation or the same exploitation as soon as there is an exploitation. I explain my point. If a farmer had a plantation of tomato and changed for apple, it's okay. But as long as there is still an exploitation.
Yeah. More interesting would be the case if he has apples and switches to sheep grazing. But
for now, it's no problem. It's no debate. I found it funny because in Germany, it's a debate, animal or plantation. In France, it didn't seem to be a debate. Animals are okay. But the question will be how much?
Yes, that's the same question which is thrilling us in Germany. What is actually the standard or the criteria for husbandry between or below the panels? That's very exciting, Benedikte. Sasha asked a question regarding if there's any certification process. You mentioned before that actually the definition you set up in the last years in France is actually not a standard like in Germany or like a norm like in Germany, but it will become a real law, as I understood it. So actually, by law, it should be guaranteed, as Sasha asked, to really meet the criteria. But how is this certification process or the procedures towards assuring that these criteria are met?
As of now, it's actually there is no clear definition, and there's one certification from the AFNOR, which is guaranteeing that the ground are protected. That's the idea of the installation. This certificate you have no definition stages, some public institutes, some with a focus on the synergy between agricultural and energy. But since the law is still debating, it didn't achieve right now. The ANO is then used for collectivity, municipality, when they want to know if they can execute a project or not. The ANO is asked to certify the project. And it's, as far as I could see, it's only checking if the agricultural aspect are preserved and the grants too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So at least you have clarity about who is the responsible institution to certify. Then you are already more advanced than in Germany. In Germany, it's still open who will have this. So we'll have one last question, and it actually appeared also twice regarding the question if the CAP aids from the EU are paid in France or not.
That's why, I thought I already told it. No, there aren't if there is an agrivoltaics installation, because the grant is losing his agricultural character, and they are losing then the aids also. It's coming from this arrêté from 2015 who said agricultural land can only be used for something else 15 days in a row per year. And that's also a point who could be changed by the new law. It was written in it, it's not a guarantee that the farmer still became the heir, but it's in the making still.
All right. Thanks for the clear answer. We hope that things will progress in this direction. It's 9:50, exactly 10 minutes are passed. Thank you so much, Benedicte. There are some open questions in the chat. Benedicte, if you do have the time and answer them in the chat, I think the participants would be very glad. Me too. And now, Jens, it's up to you to continue with the neighbor country of France, with Germany. The screen is yours, Jens.
Yes, thanks a lot. Nice, heartily welcome here from Berlin. Isal will be my co-pilot. He will make the slides, and I'm looking forward to show you the legal aspects for agrivoltaics in Germany. On the next slide, maybe a short introduction where I come from. Come from the BBH group. This is a law firm with a BBH and different other companies. The idea is that we can help you as our client on the complete range of questions you have, our interdisciplinary advisory approach. We have lawyers, public auditors, tax advisors, engineers, and business experts, as well as IT professionals. So the idea is that we can help you without asking someone else. This is our idea. One day it works, one day it doesn't work as well, but I hope today it will work with the technique as well. The BBH on the next slide, this is the home of the lawyers, so to say. We are about 250 professionals in Germany. We consult about 4,000 clients here in Germany, mainly on the energy law and the infrastructure law. And if we switch on the next slide, this is my slide, so to say. My name is Jens Vollbrecht. I work here at the BBH for 17 years. I started in 2005. Since 2013, I'm partner here in Berlin. I studied the law, the law in Göttingen and Hamburg, and before that, I had a first life in forestry. I studied in Freiburg and Göttingen, and so you see, I really like it if we have now the two aspects of the natural aspect and the legal aspects combined in agrivoltaics, and I'm looking forward to show you the legal framework in 4 steps. On the next slide, you see what I have planned to show you in the next 20 seconds. A sprint over 4 hurdles, the EEG 2023, the Renewable Resource Act, then I will switch to the EU Subsidized for Agriculture, the public law and the tax law, and then I hope you have a small package to know what happened here in Germany. We start with the EEG 2023. You see, 2023, this is the Renewable Resource Act that will be in force from the 1st of January 2023. Looking a little bit in the future, but it's not too far away. The idea of the Renewable Resource Act is the promotion of renewable energies. So with the agrivoltaics, we're perfect on the point, so we can take the Renewable Resource Act 2023. What's the way? How? What does the legislator want to help us as operator of an agrivoltaics plant? We have 3 legal claims. This is wonderful. So we need no contract. We have legal claims. So when we know the law, it's perfect. We take the right paragraph, say this is our right, and then the plant operator can have these aspects and rights against the grid operator. The operator of the public grid, this is the person who has to fulfill our wishes. And we have 3 legal claims. The first is the primary connection of the plant to the power grid. And the idea is when we search the right point where we connect our power plant to the public grid, we change and look for different possibilities to get the contact, and then we will choose this possibility with the lowest economic costs overall. So in this point, we don't ask who has to pay which costs. We only look for the lowest economic costs, and we found this possibility. We show who has to bear which costs, and the principle is that the connection to the grid is paid by the operator of the plant, and if it's necessary to build up, to make an extension of the grid, then the operator of the grid has to bear these costs. This is the first claim. The second claim is that we have the right of the primary purchase of the generated electricity in the plant. And these 2 rights, the connection and the primary purchase, this is forever. That means from the start of the operation of our power plant to the day when we remove the power plant or agrivoltaics plant from the area. The third claim we have, this is the financial subsidies for the electricity, which is supplied to the grid. And this is normal only for 20 years. So this is not forever, but for the 20 years. If we look on the next slide, we will switch to the one possibility to get money from the grid operator. If we have a plant with an installation from more than 100 kilowatt, we are obliged to sell the electricity to a third person, not to the grid operator. This is called the direct marketing. And maybe you can say, okay, if you sell the electricity to a third person, the grid operator says, I pay no money. But in Germany, we have the grid, a big heart for the power plant operators. And we have one possibility in this so-called subsidized direct marketing, that we can get the so-called market premium from the grid operator. The market premium is calculated in the way you see here. We have the so-called applicable value. This is cent per kilowatt. We give our subsidies per kilowatt hour. This is feed in the grid. And this applicable value is determined in an auction if it is not determined by the Renewable Resource Act. And the idea is that with this amount per kilowatt hour, the power plant operator can install the power plant, run the power plant, and sell the electricity. So he is happy or she is happy when she gets this amount of money. And for the calculation of the market premium, we take this applicable value minus the yearly market value. The yearly market value, this is a spot market price. So they think, okay, if you discuss with a third person, you will probably earn this money. And so they said, okay, the market premium is the difference between the applicable value and the yearly market value. On the next slide, you will see if you take part in an auction, this is not a possibility you can change. If you said, okay, we take the value in the EEG, or I go in an auction. If you have solar energy, you're obliged to take part in an auction if the power plant, so our agrivoltaics, is bigger than 1 megawatt. If it's bigger than 1 megawatt, you have one possibility that you don't have to take part in an auction. This is when you have an operator as a citizens energy company, then you only are obliged to take part in auctions if the power plant is bigger than 6 megawatt. So this is a small but fine difference. So you see, you have the obligation if you have a big power plant, and if you are smaller, so to say, then you get the value. I said the green sign from the Renewable Resource Act. This is the calculation of the market premium. And now the question is, on the next slide, if we fulfill the prerequisites for the financial promotion. In Germany, we have the challenge that when you have a ground-mounted PV, you have to erect the power plant on a special area. If you don't erect your power plant on this special area, it is not possible to get a financial promotion. And I show you here some possibilities of those areas. These are 500 meters along motorways and railways. So on the right and on the left-hand side of motorways and railways, if you erect the agrivoltaics, there you have the possibility to get a financial promotion. If you look in the EE 2021, this was only 200 meters. So this is one big step to make it much more possible to earn money by the financial promotion from the Renewable Resource Act, because the aim we had in Germany up to 2030, we have planned and installed amount of solar energy of 2015 gigawatt. So if you see maybe 50% the ground mountain systems, these are about 100 gigawatt. And if you want to promote them, you have to give the plant operators the field, the area. And this is one reason why we stepped from 200 meters to 500 meters. And now, finally, we have special solar systems. And you see, we have here the arable agrivoltaics, the horticulture agrivoltaics, and the grassland agrivoltaics. So that means a combination between the production of energy and using, for example, as arable land from cultivation of permanent or perennial crops, or we have a permanent pasture. As you see, no animals are obliged, so to say, if you have those agrivoltaic systems. This is not in the plan of the legislator in the EEG. Maybe if you say, oh, this is not very different description of agrivoltaics, then I have to tell you that the Federal Network Agency is obliged to make these definitions much more precise. So in the moment we are waiting for this small law of the Federal Network Agency, and then we will see what will be the prerequisites at its end. We have a small law from the Federal Network Agency for the arable agrivoltaics and the horticulture agrivoltaics, but we are waiting for the grassland agrivoltaics. So this is only a small idea of area where we can get the financial promotion. On the next slide, you will see that we have the value, the AV, as I said, for the power plants up to 1 megawatt. So you see they don't have to in auction. There will be the amount of 7 cents per kilowatt hours. If the power plant is bigger than 1 megawatt up to 6 megawatt, then you know, okay, if you have an energy citizen company, then they are not obliged to take part in auctions. So the legislator says, okay, we take the AV, this value from the auctions that are made, because they said, okay, there might be no big difference between these systems and the money that you need if you want to run agrivoltaics or a solar system in the scale up to 6 megawatt. And if you are bigger and you know you have to take part in auction, on the next slide you can see that the value for the calculation, the AV, this is the result of the auction. So it depends if you're a lucky winner or if you don't are selected by the Federal Network Agency. There is a so-called technology bonus for horizontally elevated agrivoltaics. You see that depends when you are awarded in the auction. It starts with 1.2 cents per kilowatt hour when you are lucky in the auction in 2023, and it goes down up to 0.5 cents per kilowatt hour if you are awarded in the auction in 2026 up to 2028. And you see there is no technology bonus for plants outside the auction. This is not okay, and we are working to solve this problem, because we said small agrivoltaics, and small, you see, if you have a citizen-run agri-PV, this would be up to 6 megawatt, and we say there is no reason to make a difference concerning this technology bonus. So we hope we have luck. We are working for it. Okay, this is the EEG 2023. Now we have a short look to the EU agricultural subsidies, and we make a short look in the so-called Direktzahlungsdurchführungsverordnung. This is the legal framework we have up to now, and we have the small problem that it is said agricultural land used for non-agricultural activity is mainly used for agricultural activity, if the agricultural activity can be conducted without being severely hindered by the intensity, the kind, the duration, or the point of the non-agricultural activity according to other rules in this paragraph. So you can say, okay, if we have agrivoltaics, we will have a system in which the agricultural activity can be continued. So maybe we have no problem, but up to now we have a problem maybe because in the law is it said regardless of being in agricultural land are especially the following areas mainly used non-agricultural activities, and these are areas containing plants for the use of solar energy. So on the next slide, you see this is a problem if you only look on the wording of this paragraph, but we think we have to look with the glasses of the EU law, and so we said we have to make an evaluation made on a case-to-case basis according to the EU law. And then we says, okay, if this combination is possible and the agricultural use is possible up to now, then we say there is no reason why we are not in the right to get those subsidies. And we have some decisions from the court, the VGH München. The court works with these ideas and says, okay, absolutely right, we can't stop with the wording of the Direktzahlungsdurchführungsverordnung. We have to think of the EU law. And in this case, there were animals on the same area, and they said, okay, the animals can work and feed there without severely hindered by the open space PV unit. And so they said, okay, you have the right to get the subsidies. So you see, this is not fitting perfect, but the idea, as I tell you, is in this decision. And so we're optimistic that we may be lucky winners if we go to court. But look in the future. On the next slide, we will see the legislator reacted, and we have now the so-called GAP, die Direktzahlungsverordnung. It's really crazy in Germany if you want to show what are the names of the legislation. But positive is that you see we have a small in the definition. It is okay, areas containing the use of solar energy, not mainly used for agriculture. This is the idea. And now they said, except the operator proves it as an agri-PV plant. So quite positive because we don't have to argue maybe as too complicated as I show you on the slide before. And we have a definition in the GAP Direktzahlungsverordnung, what is an agri-PV plant? And it is said that it is fulfilled these prerequisites that does not exclude the agricultural use of the area using normal agricultural methods, machinery and tools, and reduces the agricultural area by at most 15% in accordance with Dienstspec. Okay, so Dienstspec, I didn't mention that. This is a technical norm. Max and his colleagues was in the development of the Dienstspec, and there are more precise definitions. What are the prerequisites for agrivoltaics? And one aspect is the amount of area that is not used or possible used for the agricultural using. And so the legislator said, okay, this point of the Dienstspec we take out and put it here in the GAP Verordnung. If you fulfill these requisites, then you get 85% of the area underlying the determination according to the sentence 1. This is eligible for subsidies. So, as I said, this is a look in the future. You will see on the next slide this GAP-Direktzahlungsverordnung enters in force on the same time as a law, the GAP-Direktzahlungsgesetz, but this GAP-Direktzahlungsgesetz is not in force up to now, but we hope that will be in force next year, so we can work with the GAP-Direktzahlungsverordnung and maybe we have it much more easier.
Jens, I know
Yes,
there's
Max.
still some slides left. We do have 2 minutes only, so if you can rush the last slides, that would be helpful to have still a few minutes for the discussion.
Yes, of course. So, Özal, we work hard. Public law, but that's easy. We have only one slide. If you need a permit for the erection of the agrivoltaics, and it depends where you erect the agrivoltaics. And you see, if we have this outdoor area, not by this red of my slide, paragraph 35 of the Baugesetzbuch, it is said normally it is not possible to erect there anything. You should be relaxing there and enjoying the nature, but it is not the place for buildings or things like that. But there is an exception. If you have privileged projects, then the legislator said, okay, this is okay if you erect the project there. And we have one problem, that solar systems or agrivoltaics in the moment are not privileged. So we have to work with, yes, in step-by-step argumentation that is convincing. For example, I think if the agrivoltaics serves agriculture, then maybe arguments to say this is privileged, but in the moments it's hard work. The gray fields, this is the idea if the community has made a development plan, and then you only have to fill the prerequisites of the development plan, and then you make it. So the big problem of projects. Okay, next, only the tax. And you see the problem is in Germany, if you use an area, an agricultural area for the erection or the running of solar energy, you have disadvantages for taxation because area is not an area as agriculture or forestry, because it have another definition. It's going, for example, to Grundsteuer B, and this is not good because you have to pay much more tax if you are in the Grundsteuer A or B. So better would be if you stay in a forest or agriculture category. And this problem is solved, as you see on the next slide, because they said, okay, very short, Max, if you have agrivoltaics plant, then you stay in the category forestry and agriculture, and you have no problems with the tax. That's it. Thanks a lot, Özal, for helping me for the co-pilot. Thanks very much for your attention. And I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thanks, Jens, for speeding up. We have already so many questions in the chat, and I know already that we can't answer all, but we tried to do it fast. So that's why one answer I'm directly answering to David Schupesser, who asked about any differences of the legislation in the different Bundesländer, the different regions in Germany. And as far as I know, there are permitting alleviations at least in two Bundesländer, which are Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and Niedersachsen. And I know that also in Baden-Württemberg, where we are in Freiburg, there are also discussions about finding ways how to ease the permitting procedures for agrivoltaics. There might be more. So if any one of the participants also is aware of this, please share it in the chat with David. Then another question from Bert Hertele was, Jens, regarding the benchmark for the obligation to tender, 1 or 6 megawatts. Is it in AC or DC capacity?
Oh, yes, this is a good question. It is I think it's an AC, not with the so-called Wechselrichterleistung, but the Modulleistung.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we are discussing it in another aspect for the grid connection point. The question if we take the power of the module or the Wechselrichter. I'm sorry, I don't know what the word for Wechselrichter in English, but in our opinion, we have the module. This is the point. Yeah,
it's the inverter. And if anyone in the round, we have more than 200 participants, does know this fact, then please share it with the rest of the audience. Makoto and Ulrike, great that you're also here. You asked about the definition of horizontal agrivoltaics, or if it's meant to be horizontal elevated, like in the German Dienstspec. Also, if this is to be seen as an opposite or contrast to the vertical systems. Jens?
Yes, Max, we discussed it. It is changed a little bit. It is said that they have to be higher than 2.1 meters below the ground. And the idea is that you have so-called the possibility to use the space up to 2.1 meter without problems. So the modules or the power, the plants have to be higher than 2.1 meters.
Yeah. So the idea. The wording horizontal and vertical is actually not part of the law anymore, but according to the Dienstspec, just the threshold of 2.10 meters.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for clarifying this. And then there was a question about the 15% of Dienstspec. Why 15%?
Well, Max, that's your turn.
It's my turn. So we had long discussions, but in the end, of course, it's somehow arbitrary where to draw the line. And 15% of land losses seem to be a minor share of the total land. Some argued for a more stricter regulation, some voted for less strict. That's the agreement of the Dienstspec Consortium. Sorry to not have a more scientific answer to that.
Yes, and as you said, when we have the horizontal systems, you only need 1, 2, 3% of the area or the land. And with the subsidies, you only get for 85% of the area the subsidies. So you can say this is not perfect, but I think we have made a good step in the right direction, and maybe we can make it in the next legislation period a little bit better.
Yeah. Then Bengt, you raised the question which thrills a lot of us: is grazing allowed within the renewable energy law? Jens. Okay,
you think with animals or sheeps? Yes.
Yes.
No, I think in the moment not. Okay. But we will see what the federal network agency will make if you say graze land, if there are animals allowed or not. We only said, okay, take care, don't open it maybe too fast, the promotion for agrivoltaics because of the acceptance. I think we should really take care that there will be no systems where you say this is not really agrivoltaics. And so we were optimistic with the definition of breadth. We will see what the agency will make at this point.
Yeah. There was one answer regarding the benchmark of the capacity. Yannick says it's a DC capacity. Thanks for clarifying this. And there is another central question that we discuss also frequently. Why is a system like the vertical system provided by Next to Sun not included in the bonus structure of the Renewable Energy Law 2023?
Yeah, the idea is that the legislator said, okay, is the money enough for a power plant compared with normal ground mounted PV? And then he says, okay, vertical is not much expensive than the normal ground mounted PV, but if you put the modules up to 2.1 meters in the sky, then you need much more material, and then the costs are higher. And then he says, okay, this is the idea of the technology bonus. Cost aspects, this is the point at this area.
They will probably not be competitive in the tenders.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two questions address the calculation of the 15%, or from Sandra, for example, whether the rest of the Dienstspec criteria have to be fulfilled to receive the EU cap.
No, in this point not. This is only the criteria of the area that is not cannot be used for the agricultural use. The other aspects are not relevant for the subsidies for agriculture. This is my idea, because this is only set with the connection to the area that is not used for agriculture working, but not the other aspects.
Yeah. And Makoto, your question, and Yannick, the question how to calculate this and where to draw the line between category 1 and category 2 of the Dienstspec, it's pretty well explained in the Dienstspec. It's not yet explained how to guarantee this, how to certify this, how to sanctionize this. That's something which has to be done still in the future. Looking at the agenda, we are over with our time, 10:25 it says. Jens, thank you so much for your insights, for your contributions. And there are still some open questions for you that you can enjoy your break with questions or a coffee, both. But you can maybe also answer them after your coffee. And then we'll meet again in 10 minutes at 10:35. And then we will shed light on Israel with Mike Green. Have a good coffee break or tea or anything you would like to join. See you later.
Thanks for the questions and the discussion. See you.
Okay.
Thank you. And Mike, in the meanwhile, I give you the rights of presentation also.
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to make certain that it is working. Yeah.
Yes.
So I see it. There it is now. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I also come in a few minutes.
Okay. Good.
Welcome back after the break. I hope you enjoyed it. It's very difficult to see if the people are really in front of their computers now. But as we don't have too much time, we have to continue. Mike, you ready?
Yes, you hear me?
We hear you great. We see you. We see your slide.
Okay.
Thank you so much that you're here. And we know that it's very dynamic in Israel, but I'm not so aware about the last months, what developed there. So thanks for sharing your time, and yeah, floor is yours.
Okay. So thank you very much for allowing me to present on the legal frameworks for agrivoltaics in Israel. My name is Mike Green. I currently work with Arava ECNT. It stands for Environmental Consulting and Technology. I am a consultant. I come from the technical side of the PV. I am not a lawyer. And so the legal frameworks for agrivoltaics in Israel is a work in process. It has only last month, actually it's a few weeks ago, that we received the first draft that is going through for public opinion regarding the overall legal framework for agrivoltaics in the country. Legal frameworks in Israel, legal frameworks are something we're very good at. There is one lawyer for every 128 citizens in the country, which is either very good or indicative of the state of affairs, whereby I believe we are perhaps the most overregulated country in the OECD, perhaps in the world. And this is primarily due to the fact that the state of Israel has existed since only 1948. Our legal frameworks were from the Ottoman Empire for decades, for hundreds of years. British law came in 1919, and in 1948 we have our own state. So we have a very complicated legal framework for just about everything. In order to understand the current situation of the current legality or the legal framework for agrivoltaics, it's important to understand the characteristics of the country, because as opposed to the previous two presentations we had, countries that have been developing their own laws for hundreds of years, and countries that are much, much larger than our country with much more arable land, here it's all about the land. It's all about, and in that case, it's also important to understand that the Israeli government owns 93% of the land in the country. The existing 70% of land that is not owned by the government and allocated by the government is land that was owned privately before 1948. So all land today is leased for 50 years, for 50 years at a time, for specific purposes. The land is purposed. When a lease is granted, it's granted for a purpose of agriculture or a purpose of residential or factories. We have purposes for specific purposes for pretty much everything. And when land is purposed, issued for a specific purpose, in order to do something else with that, we must go about changing the purpose of that land, and that can take many years. Another aspect of the country that has to be taken into account is that we are still an electrical island. This makes the electrical distribution of whatever PV, whatever energy that we produce, quite challenging. Another element of our renewable energy is that since we have no large rivers and little wind, we have some wind in the north, but very little compared to the rest of the country. Solar PV comprises 94% of the renewable energy in the country. The country itself is very small, 22,145 square meters. 2% of this is water. 30% is agricultural. It's important also to understand that of this small country, 60% of the country is the Negev Desert. There are other unarable desert areas outside of the Negev, but 60% of the country is the Negev. Since you would expect that in the desert, we would be able to produce electricity easily. PV would go well in the desert, a small desert particularly. However, only 13% of the population live there. And therefore, whatever energy we produce there has to be sent north. Our population is 9 million, and we have an installed electrical capacity of 20 gigawatt. As I said, it's all about the land here, because everything else to do with electrical energy, specifically renewables, is pushed by the government. The government is very much on board. The country is very much on board regarding what has to be done for global warming and carbon reduction. The government has issued some rather challenging targets for 2030 and 2050. Our first target was made for 10% in 2020, which we did not reach. 6% produced energy and 7% of installed power is what we managed to achieve by 10%. However, we are optimistic that we will achieve our next targets, in so far as the reasons that we did not achieve the 10% was due to the problems that our overregulation, the tremendous amount of regulation that we had in the country, prevented us from moving along comfortably in advancing PV technology. The PV market started in around 2008, 2010. Tremendous amount of regulation from every direction. It really hindered the development of the industry. However, over the past 10 years, we have made great headway in reducing the amount of regulation. And today it is very, very easy, relatively speaking, to put PV modules on your rooftop or in your field. And therefore, we are optimistic that by 2030 we will be able to achieve 30% of our electrical production through renewable energy. Even taking into account that we expect to have to produce 25% more than what we would be producing today. We have 3 evaluations of what we will be requiring of what our consumption will be in 2030. If we take the middle line, we're going to need 25% more energy then, therefore 30% by 2030 is a challenge that we have to work towards. As far as 2050 is concerned, there the government hasn't declared a specific amount of renewable energy. They have declared 85% carbon reduction as compared to 2015. Achieving 85% carbon reduction today looks like we will have to be 95% renewable. Of course, carbon reduction, the promise of the government, does not necessarily entail only moving to renewable energies. There are other methods of reducing carbon. However, in order to achieve 2050, we need a tremendous amount of land, about 5,000 square meters extra a year, if I'm not mistaken, from 2030 on. In order to achieve the 2030 declaration, the 2030 promise, we're going to require another 12,000 megawatts, 12 gigawatts of solar power, of solar PV power, with 2,500 megawatts of storage, another 800 of renewable energy that's not solar PV, probably wind. And we are aware that we will still have to build some more fossil fuel plants to meet the consumption that is expected for 2030. This will be, of course, natural gas. Coal will be phased out. And of course, so it's basically natural gas and the renewables. So in order to achieve 12,000 megawatts by 2030, then we are going to need around between 10,000 and 12,000 hectares of land. A lot of work by various agencies, particularly the Public Utilities Authority, have gone into it, into understanding what land is available in order to achieve this. and they have divided the types of land to the two lists. One is reasonably available, and this we'd call long haul authorization. The reasonably available land means that it is land that is currently available for a PV installation, for solar power installation, and we can assume that the owners or the lessees of this land or of this area for PV installation are amenable to installing PV on the land. So we have 2,000 hectares of land which are currently available for being purposed for PV. Rooftops are readily available. The past 10 years have brought about changes in regulation whereby an owner of a rooftop can put on PV without a building permit after the fact, and the presentation of a letter for authorization from an engineer that the roof will not collapse, that it's sustainable. Then the licensing or the permitting entity, if it's the city or the municipality, will change the plans for the rooftop. So it's very easy to install rooftop PV in Israel now. Reservoirs, somewhat more challenging, but a lot has been done. A tremendous amount of PV has been installed over the past 2 years on reservoirs around the country. The 4,500, 4,600 hectares are available for that, and highway interchanges is currently under the microscope of those interested in moving along with installing PV. So assuming that the owners of these resources for PV installation are amenable to installing PV, then we are still going to be short of what we require for the amount of PV to be installed in 2030. The second list, what we would call long haul authorization, are areas that are less amenable to PV installation, though it could possibly be done. There we're referring to the IDF, these are Defense Forces firing ranges, the maneuvering grounds for training military, Bedouin land, which is available. However, the Bedouins have to be amenable to installing the PV. And other dual usage, which I wasn't sure exactly what I was referring to, is also available. However, on top of all this, we have 430,000 hectares of arable agricultural land, which is ostensibly available for dual usage with PV. And therein we see the importance of PV or agrivoltaics to our government, to our countries attaining the decarbonization that we're hoping to achieve by 2030 and 2050. So let's take a look now at the legal entities that affect, or the legal entities that are involved with our agrivoltaics and achieving a proper framework for agrivoltaics to flourish. There are two legal entities that we should focus on. As I mentioned, the government owns 93% of the land, and it is administered by the Israel Land Authority, referred to as the Israel Land Administration until 1960. From 1960, and then in 2013, it became the Israel Land Authority, the ILA, and its purposes are to allocate the allocation of land for all purposes. And as I've mentioned before, that the land is allocated for a specific purpose. If a farmer wants to farm, his land must be allocated for the purpose of agriculture. If he wants to build a house, he can't do this on the land that has been allocated that has been purposed for agriculture. He must have separate land purposed specifically for building his home. The ILA is also responsible for the acquisition expropriation for state requirements and the protection of rights to land. Expropriation and the protection of rights to land are two interesting sides of the same coin. And the most important element is land management. They're in charge of the registration and records, what is referred to as the land registry, or the Tabo as it was called during Ottoman times. The second entity is the Israel Planning Administration. The IPA, Israel Planning Administration, is an independent unit within the Israel Ministry of Interior. Its primary mission is to plan and regulate land use and development in the State of Israel through the formulation and execution of national and regional planning policies. The national planning of land usage, master plans. We have master plans for everything. Many of the master plans actually originated during the British Mandate. They were very big on planning things. We have master plans for railroads, master plans for airports, master plans for highways, master plans for industry, for residential. Master plan is a government-defined plan for specific elements that are required by the population. Master plans take many years to produce. They're master plans locally, master plans nationally. The IPA is responsible for developing and overseeing the national planning projects, handling detailed plans, promulgating planning regulations, and providing professional guidance to district planners and district planning employees. We're beginning to see how this is going to affect our agrivoltaics. And they direct the operations of the planning institutions at the national and district levels, providing professional, administrative, and operational support to the different units of Israel's planning apparatus. All this is from their definition on their website. Now we see that it is comprised of 6 regional planning bureaus and 12 internal divisions. So these regional planning bureaus are responsible for land administration in their area. So what they would consider to be acceptable for agrivoltaics where I live could very well be different from what that regional planning bureau would think in the Negev area, the Arava area, or in the Golan area. So along with that framework, now we understand who is responsible for land in the country. Let's take a look at how the Ministry of Energy has been pushing the agrivoltaics and moving it along, despite the challenges or the amorphous framework that currently exists. The Ministry of Energy, together with the Ministry of Agriculture, led a call for pilot projects dealing with dual usage of land, combining agriculture and photovoltaics. In Israel, we refer to it as agri-PV, and that was April of 2021, about a year and a half ago. The expressed purpose is examining the feasibility of energy production and agriculture on the same land to define guidelines for agrivoltaics. Something that was done in France and Germany about 5 years ago. You've passed this stage. You've defined your frameworks. You've defined your concepts and your classifications of agrivoltaics, and we are learning from that. We are not yet there. The call for the pilot projects requires that each team must include 4 elements. A developer, of course. The developer has to put it together financially, and an agronomist, an expert in agriculture, and it must be tied in with one of only four authorized research institutes in the country. And of course, the 4th element is a farmer who has some land. The maximum lot size for the land is 100 hectares. 17 million shekel were awarded for these grants. Divide that by 4, approximately €4 value. That means about 4 point something million euro. And the pilot projects were awarded. There were 130 lots authorized in this project, including 55 crop types in 100 different places around the country. And the permitting began. In other words, the people who won the developers who won the pilot began the process of bringing about their project. This required going to the relevant authorities and understanding what they require. The Israel Planning Administration announced that a building permit is required to install any PV system on agricultural land. The building permit is applied for at the local level, but then it can be passed up to the regional level. And if it's large enough or has much of an impact, it can go up to the national level of the planning agency. The sensitivity of agricultural land creates many difficulties for the permitting agency. Local permitting agencies have varied opinions regarding land usage. As I said, what the local agency would consider acceptable in one area, and where I live perhaps, is going to be different than what would be acceptable to the agency that is working in the Negev. While the individual research project lots are slowly working through the subjective local permitting authorities, each in his own area, to achieve a building permit so that he can continue with his pilot project, the government has introduced an interministerial work to develop a single set of regulations to be applied across the country for this application. And that has been issued in its form for approval just last month. That which was published last month for public scrutiny is what came about due to the Parliament, the Knesset decision of August 2021. That continues the decision of 2020 promoting renewable energy. That decision from August of 2021 was purposed to develop a reserve of land through the optimization of land to be used for electricity production. This specific decision touched on many, many issues, from varied issues from private land to minefields in the north and various other places in the country from the various wars that have been here, and Bedouin rights to land and how it's possible for them to take part in using their land for PV, the IDF firing ranges. The many are just a few of the many issues that were discussed in this decision. One of the elements of this decision was to develop a working group that will be established to deliver a list of suggestions that will enable the installation of PV systems on agricultural land while ensuring continued effective farming of the land. They wanted this to be within 60 days, which it may have been, but then it had to make the rounds of the various government ministries, and it was just published, as I said, last month, in November of 2022. The underlying concept is to define a single master plan or template for all agricultural land in the country that will streamline the permitting process for installing PV and dual usage without changing the purpose of the land. It's interesting to see who was to be in this interministerial work group as per the government decision. It shows how delicate the concept of land is in our country. The work group was headed up by the two heads of the group were a senior member of the Ministry of Finance and the Israel Land Authority. The other three members under them are from the Ministry of Agriculture, the Israel Planning Authority, and the Ministry of Energy. And then there were the work group members. So we have an additional member of the Land Authority, an additional member of the Permitting Authority, another member from the Ministry of Agriculture, and then we have additional members from the Ministry of Justice, 4 from the Ministry of Energy, which kind of makes sense, and 2 from the electrical regulator, the Public Utilities Authority. And note that 8 members of this work group are from the Ministry of Finance. And of course, one member from the Ministry of Environmental Protection. This multidisciplinary group is necessary because of the sensitivity of agricultural land in our country. The agricultural land is very sensitive because we have very little of it. Based on the OECD statistics, we have only 0.4 hectares per person of arable land in this country, as opposed to the average of 0.27 for other OECD members. As I mentioned, there is no private land. Well, only 7% is private land, 93% is owned by the government. So there's little free choice regarding its usage. Land that has been purposed for a specific usage is difficult to change to another usage. The allocation must be based on a democratic, even-handed, fair sharing way of doing things because it's government owned, it's not private owned. We pride ourselves on being a democracy, and better land. And we have to understand that there's better land for agriculture in the north. the center, the north of the country, where most of the population is. However, the land in the south is best for PV population, not so good for agriculture, though there is a tremendous amount of agriculture there. But we have an undersized electrical transmission infrastructure, as the population is in the north. Traditionally, before the renewable energy, before the distributed energy became an issue starting around 10 years ago, power is produced in the center of the country and sent south. Now it has to go the other way around. So our electrical transmission infrastructure is grossly undersized for this task. And energy is easier to produce than food, less risk. So dual usage can lead to a reduction in agricultural yield. Therefore, there's a tremendous sensitivity to using agricultural land, and for this reason, the government thought necessary to make such a multidisciplinary work group to decide how best to go about it, building a legal framework for agrivoltaics.
Mike, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
It's super interesting. Can you finish within the next 2 minutes? Is it possible?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
So the decision, or I should say, the document that was produced by this group, it's still unratified. It only came out last month. I have here a list of the interesting points of this legal framework that will come about, assuming it's ratified in its entirety. There may be other things added. The first is that agrivoltaic land will not be at the expense of a farmer's existing growing allocation. So if a farmer is currently going about his farming with land that he has and crops that he has, he doesn't have to sacrifice it for agrivoltaics. He is allowed to add on to what he's been doing, and he doesn't have to take off what he has been doing. Similarly, villages, I'm using the term village translated from moshav or kibbutz, which are the agricultural cooperatives in the country. They have been allocated 25 hectares for solar production, and they will have an additional 50 hectares for solar production, so that they don't take from that allocation for the agrivoltaics. Agrivoltaic ventures will not require tender. They will be allowed to develop in the center of the country in specific cases. The design and implementation of the supporting energy infrastructure, including energy storage, transformation buildings, all the other buildings that would normally require a separate building permit, and the costs of achieving these building permits will be done so with no additional charge. An important one, that once agrivoltaic, the purposed land usage cannot be changed from agriculture without penalty. Until the Ministry of Agriculture pilot is completed, that pilot that I mentioned previously, only projects on irrigated land and orchards will be authorized, and only with the Ministry of Agriculture authorization. Such projects will carry high penalties for cessation of the agricultural element of the installation. How is this going to be policed? An enforcement unit will be found that will enforce the ongoing agriculture in the dual use installation. And in my opinion, the most interesting aspect of it is that the leasing agreement for the purposing of the land for agrivoltaics will include a minimum yield clause of not less than 70% of the annual average yield for land of similar type. So the developer will have to report agricultural yield and it's monitoring. So in conclusion, agrivoltaics is a no-brainer for our country, but it requires a careful balancing act between reducing carbon footprint and reducing the dependence on renewable energy on one hand, while ensuring a viable agricultural baseline, protection of the environment, democratic and fair allocation of these natural resources, while ensuring a healthy economy. And I think I made it within 2 minutes.
Great 2.5, Mike. But it was very interesting, the last part especially. So maybe we can directly jump into there. And I think we can prolong the schedule a little bit. I will shorten my final part because I think that's so great to see that actually, Mike, you overtook us regarding the legislation in Germany and France, maybe also because just the enforcement unit that is in discussion, how to guarantee the agricultural production. That's something where we are not as far in Germany, to be very clear. And it's impressive to see how many ministries are working together to push this forward. I was impressed about the large part of the financing ministry. I wonder if we can encourage them also here in Germany to participate. We have already some questions there. There's one from Ludovic Mutusami, who's asking about the incentives. I mean, you actually mentioned it now in the end, but would this mean that really no tenders will be conducted in the future, and you will create another framework, as I understood from your last slide?
Yeah, when I understood, again, this is what I am quoting from, what I'm writing from is the suggestions that were published last month. They many of them are somewhat could be unclear. With regards to tenders, I think what that means is that there does not have to be tendering. In many cases, there are many types of projects in the country for PV that required a tender, and the government tenders with the government were very complicated. What they're saying here is that, from what I understand, what they're saying is there's not a requirement for tender, meaning that the agrivoltaics can be sold, or the energy can be sold in the usual ways. If you have a rooftop, if you have a field, then it can go about the regular methods for achieving the licensing from the Israel Electric Company in order to operate, to get onto the grid. And as far as tariffs are concerned, I would assume that incentives primarily is question dealing with incentives. So at this point in time, there are no there are incentives. There's a tariff. There is a tariff for smaller systems. However, we believe that will cease insofar as we're working towards a market, a electrical market, whereby electricity can be bought and sold by individuals, meaning that a owner of a rooftop system or an agrivoltaic system will be able to sell his energy to a third party or to the Israel Electric Company at the going rate. Tariffs, which are defined by the PUA. So there is at this point, there is no specific rate incentive. There may be. I would imagine that it is so important to us, agrivoltaic is so important to us, that I can see there being a specific incentive for it, but it has not yet been discussed as far as I know.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for this answer, Mike. And I'm so curious, if this draft of legislation is available in English, probably not, huh?
Not yet.
Yeah.
I had when I found it online. I looked to see if it was translated yet, and it had not yet been translated. Mm-hmm. I imagine that if not this draft, then when it does come into law, then it will be.
Yeah. Still, it would be interesting for us to have a source. If you can send it the Hebrew version, we
certainly
can maybe ask somebody to at least translate the most crucial parts, because I'm very sure that this discussion you have on this high level in Israel, the outcomes are super interesting for the other countries too.
Mm-hmm. It goes two ways. We're super interested in what you've come to concluding with regards to how to define agrivoltaics, the different methods for agrivoltaics with regards to you have above 2 meters, below 2 meters on installed in hothouses, etc. The way in which you're dealing with it is we're also learning from that.
Yeah. And this brings me also to the other question regarding what are the requirements to really access to this agricultural land, what is meant by not at the expenses of growing. I know that some colleagues also from India are here today. And to my perspective, I think in countries like Israel or India, where we know that in some areas there will be huge potential benefits for the agriculture because there's too much sun, too less water. We can also set the benchmark higher than in Germany with our 66% in our Dienstback. I think going the way for which Switzerland did, with the permitting law, they said, well, you can build agrivoltaics on agricultural land only if the agriculture benefits from it. So a really high benchmark, and obviously in Switzerland it's challenging, but in Israel or in India, this might be feasible for a lot of crops and a lot of systems. So yeah, Mike.
I think that's a very interesting point, and I saw these when I saw the 70%. It kind of resonated as being okay. That's above the 66% that I saw in Europe. However, since energy is more profitable than agriculture, but agriculture is not less important than electricity, I'm wondering about that 70% myself. Let's not forget that this is a draft, and that decision will probably be changed. My guess would be that it would be to go a bit higher, because there is a lot that can benefit agriculture and PV, and that's what these pilot projects are supposed to be trying to do, to see how we benefit for agriculture as opposed to allowing it. We want to be able to benefit from it, not just exist with it.
Yeah, this demonstration, that's for sure an important step. And you mentioned there are 4 authorized research institutions which are part of this first demo run. Do you know which are the 4?
I'm very bad with names. However, they are listed, and I can send them along when I send you the draft that was issued last month. I will send the list of I'll send you the documentation for the pilot itself. I believe that is available in English.
Wow, that's awesome, Mike. Thanks a lot. Would be great. There's one question from Pratamish who's asking, well, if there's any regulation already on the way, if a switch from one crop to the other, similarly to what we discussed before, is possible or is allowed in Israel in the future?
Again, we're talking about the future. So I don't know what will be decided, but the way my feel for it, understanding the country that I understand and the industry as I see it, I don't think that I don't think that will be prohibited. I think you will be able to move from crop to crop. There is to be a monitoring of the production. So I assume that monitoring will require changing crops will probably require a declaration of such in order to be able to monitor the production. But I can't see the final decision actually limiting the farmer in any way. The farmer has difficult enough work on as it is. To limit him from that point of view, it doesn't seem to be productive. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Mike, thanks a lot. Very interesting to hear these insights from Israel, and we are curious about the next steps and whether this draft will be finished or agreed on in the future, and what is the content then. We move. Please, Mike.
I'm quite certain that by the time we finish our task or we're writing our final documentation, we should have decisions and even some installations on the ground.
Yeah. Great to hear. And Mike, I heard that there will be already again the conference conducted by Migal in, I think, February, March in Israel. So I think that's also a great opportunity to connect, to discuss more the details in Israel.
Definitely. I look forward to it.
I now would like to wrap up in 2 minutes instead of 15, which were scheduled, but I think that's fine. I would like to thank everybody for participation. It was very interesting to see parallels and also differences in the different countries. We have seen that maintaining the main agricultural activity is a central aspect of the legislation, how to get there, to set clear definitions and standards. That's something we are on the way to different extent, but it seems that in every country it plays a really important role to have a strong argument why we are allowed to access agricultural areas. All these permitting issues, the land use issues we have seen in Israel, they're very sensitive, and we can only challenge and tackle this if we have a clear standard and clear role of the agricultural activity. I would especially thank Özal in the background and all the colleagues who supported to solve the troubles we had also in advance of the meeting. I'd like to thank all the participants of the subtask 2.2 who were also present today. I'm looking forward now to at least 2 events. The second workshop we have within this subtask in approximately 1 year, and another very important date I would like to share with you, which will take place in April 12th to 14 in Korea. It will be the 4th edition of the agrivoltaics conference, this time hosted by colleagues from South Korea, as I mentioned, and you're everybody welcome to join in person, or better, to reduce your carbon footprint and join online. I'm very much looking forward. We had a lot of abstracts already handed in, and I'm very sure that we will have very interesting insights into agrivoltaics again, as we had this year in Italy. I wish you a great remaining week. Thanks to all speakers. And yeah, we can be sure that the development in agrivoltaics will be as dynamic as in the past. So we will have enough content for our next workshop in approximately 1 year. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.